I'll get straight into it. SpongeBob SquarePants The Cosmic Shake is a pretty darn solid platformer that has the classic, quirky, outlandish, yet wholesome SpongeBob feel. Cosmic Shake comes around 3 years after the much beloved Battle for Bikini Bottom remake, and it still manages to deliver a fresh experience. I've done my best to divide the review into appropriate sections, and you can feel free to skip to the one you want using the timestamps below. Let's start with the art. The art is colorful in a cartoonish way and manages to capture the spirit of SpongeBob. It won't quite be the same as the 2D animation from the cartoon, obviously, but they do a pretty good job of trying to faithfully capture the feel of Bikini Bottom. They do insert some pretty hilarious and disturbing drawings during some cutscenes. Moving on, the animations felt pretty good and responsive for the most part. I did have a minor nitpick about the attacks of the red tikis and Slamville jellies because they have an outwardly radiating wave that does damage that may be a bit hard to perceive if you aren't paying attention. I could just be getting old. Anyways, the cutscenes do have some nice touches that show some effort went into the game. For example, one cutscene with Balloon Patrick had his arm stretching to grab SpongeBob's face while having some goofy facial animations. It was a small but appreciated touch to something that could have easily gone unnoticed. There are levels with bits of 2D drawings as well that are pretty hilarious and referential. As for the level design is a blast from the past and in a fun way. It features large and spacious worlds with many gravity-defying platforms that existed in so many 3D platforming games of yore. You'll definitely feel a tinge of nostalgia and familiarity if you played these types of games in the past. The levels are pretty well designed. Most of the levels are well-disguised linear paths with many small side paths that lead to secret collectibles such as the balloons, golden spatulas, and etc. Some levels have the paths converge back onto itself, so it does feel way more open. The game does an excellent job of placing the collectible jellies in key locations to direct the player's eyes to potential paths. There are 7 worlds in total in the game, and each world feels pretty unique. The color palettes used, as well as mechanics introduced in each world, definitely help create its own identity. The 7 worlds are Pirate Goo Lagoon, which has a pirate theme, Karate Downtown Bikini Bottom, which has a karate movie being filmed on a set theme, Wild West Jellyfish Fields, which has a Wild West theme, obviously, Jelly Glove World, which has an amusement park theme, Halloween Rock Bottom, a spooky Halloween town, Medieval Sulphur Fields, a castle party theme, and finally the prehistoric kelp forest. Ooga booga is all I can say. Each world has its own boss fights and they are unique and fun in their own way. For example, in Medieval Sulphur Fields, the entire boss fight is delivering cake. Yes, you heard me correctly, the boss fight is delivering cake. Each boss is also a cameo from the cast of SpongeBob, so look forward to seeing some very familiar faces. There's not much to say other than the music is pretty great. It's a mix of recognizable SpongeBob tracks and some solid video game tunes. The sound effects are all great too. You could say they're to pie for. The game mechanics are straightforward. Let's start with the combat abilities. You start off with the standard melee attack, and as you progress through the new worlds, you will unlock new abilities. One of the first abilities unlocked is a ranged attack that will bubble one enemy, incapacitating them for a temporary moment. This is handy for disabling those pesky ranged units from attacking while you take care of those melee mobs. SpongeBob will also learn a flying karate kick. This move is actually fantastic. You can go flying from one enemy to another and infinitely chain the kick if the enemies are spread out near each other. Other abilities include a butt stomp, a belly flop that's essentially just a stronger butt stomp, and the reef blower, a very powerful device that will suck in enemies and shoot out a charged shot. The only downside is that you can only use the reef blower in certain sections, and you cannot interact with things like buttons until you drop it. This is so you can't just bring the reef blower everywhere. As for movement abilities, SpongeBob has the double jump and a short glide if you hold the jump button. I personally had a small bit of trouble with the glide going off prematurely on keyboard, since it's the same keybind as jump and double jump. You also have sections where you can glide on a surfboard and use a rope on hooks to sling yourself across like a spider bob. The movement felt pretty smooth and cohesive. The later levels have you combining double jumping and gliding into speed boost rings, and then slinging yourself across onto more jumps. As for the platforming, it felt pretty fun. It was not very difficult at all, and although you may miss a few jumps sometimes, you usually respawn right there so you can try again, or if you drop down to the lower areas, there are usually shortcuts to bring you back up again quickly. Speaking of the platforming, the game is a very simple platformer at heart. The mechanics and controls are pretty simple to grasp, and the difficulty levels seem to be aimed at a much younger audience. However, I did find myself dying a couple of times in the later levels, so the game wasn't a complete breeze. If you aren't paying attention, you'll definitely die a couple of times, but thankfully there is no real penalty for dying, other than restarting at a checkpoint if you lose all your health, or the nearest platform from where you fell to your death. There are many checkpoints, so the game is pretty generous and you won't lose much time or progress. I appreciate this quite a bit. You also won't lose any objectives completed and resources or collectibles gained before you died. The game makes replayability very convenient, letting you load at any checkpoint for previously cleared levels, as well as having most of the shortcuts already activated. The levels themselves are pretty easy to navigate with well-placed jellies to guide the player's eyes to pathways, as well as some conveniently located signs. Even Patrick will turn into a giant arrow to point the way forward, and have voice lines to direct the player's attention to certain locations. It won't be too difficult to navigate the levels. If you ever get lost, you can look around the map for sections that still have jellies and enemies around. As for boss fights, most of them are fairly manageable to beat the first time through for most experienced gamers, although I did have some difficulty with the boss in the prehistoric kelp forest. Again, I must be getting old. For the LCD gamers, there are a few collectibles and side quests to complete, and they are not too difficult to obtain in terms of effort and time required, so you will not have to worry about collecting everything and unlocking all the achievements. Also, I wouldn't stress about collecting all the jellies because they do respawn if you ever die. Also, I would recommend saving 10,000 jellies before spending any, so you can unlock the SpongeBob SquarePants achievement, which requires you to be holding 10,000 jellies at the same time. This is the only achievement that may take some grind. As for the controls, as a keyboard and mouse gamer, I literally use keyboard and mouse for everything, even Dark Souls. The key binding seemed sufficient. I would definitely recommend using a controller, however, as aiming SpongeBob for his karate kicks is definitely much easier with an analog stick. Spacebar being bound for both glide, jump, and double jump led to some frustrating platforming moments where I would glide early instead of double jumping and then gliding, but they were far and few between. As for my final thoughts, I think this is a pretty good homage to SpongeBob and a great spiritual successor to Battle for Bikini Bottom. It captures the quirkiness of the world of SpongeBob while providing a simple platformer that just focuses on fun without the tedious and meaningless time gates to grind like modern games. Why, I can go on a rant about modern game design, but I won't. The day that SpongeBob gets a Battle Royale mode and a Battle Pass is the day gaming has officially died. As I say this, I already know there probably is a SpongeBob Battle Royale out there somewhere. Curse you, modern game design. The game is definitely on the easier side, but it's a fun romp and won't overstay its welcome. You can definitely feel that some degree of love and effort went into making the game. Also, as a side note here, I really enjoy the one-liners from the NPCs. A lot of them are very funny, and some of them are very wholesome. Like, for example, there's one where a little fish is worried about their costume looking dumb, and SpongeBob tells him, I think it looks great. That's pretty wholesome right there. As for the replayability, I really enjoyed it. I went back and I'm playing it through a second time, trying to get all the achievements and collectibles. And the game does change a little bit when you go back. There are some side quests that are pretty small but pretty fun. and a lot of collectibles to get in each world. And it's taking me a little bit because some of them you have to replay through the whole level. But thankfully, they really streamlined that process by making sure you can teleport to any of the checkpoints, and also by making sure that most of the quests that you had to do before are already done, so you can just speed through the level if you want. I think it opens up another dimension to the levels. Highly recommend you go back and play through it again if you already beat the game. For complete transparency, I received a review key from Terminals, for which I am grateful for. I earned very little money doing this, so getting review keys is the only way I can continue to cover games. I did finish the game at 11.8 hours played, with 24 out of the 44 achievements obtained. I spent quite a bit of time exploring on my first time through, so it is definitely possible to beat the game in less time. I will definitely go back to 100% the game, but I had to push out this review as soon as possible. I estimate that it'll probably take me around 8 more hours to collect all the achievements and unlock everything, unless you're using a guide, so you are looking at around 20 hours to 100% the game. Some gamers may take less time and some more time. I will link an unedited playthrough of the early portions of the game if you would like to see uninterrupted gameplay. Thank you guys for watching, I really do appreciate it. If you guys need help with anything in the game, please feel free to let me know, and I'll try my best to respond in the comments, or I'll make a guide video. But most of the stuff has already been covered by a YouTuber named Cheetah's Guides. He has some excellent achievement guides if you need any help, so I will just link his channel in the description and in the comments, and you can check his channel out. He covered most of the achievements, if not all. Anyways, that's gonna be it. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.